Good evening, Detroit Lakes. This is the VikingsTerritory Breakdown on your favorite sports station, KDLM Sports, Detroit Lakes, and Fargo. I am your host, Joe Johnson, owner of the UFTA Sports Network. That's a ever-expanding network of websites like VikingsTerritory.com, PurplePTSD.com, TheDraftTeam.com, etc., etc. I am here, as always, with my co-host, my mentor, and most importantly, my friend, Mr. Joe Oberle. How are you doing, man?
Good, Joe. Speaking of Detroit Lakes, I was up in DL this past weekend.
You were?
I was, and I went up for a family thing, and me and my wife stayed in Detroit Lakes, and it was all I could do to keep ahead of and just a little separate from the throng of fans that wanted to, talk to me. And then, unfortunately, when a couple did break through, they'd always come up and they'd say, to talk to me about the website, and they'd say, "Oh, I was looking for the other Joe."
I was gonna say they probably were additionally excited because it was just you.
No, they're looking for you. No, it was guy. I'd never. I've always go up to that area every Memorial with my wife's family. She's her parents grew up in Waban, which is down the road, really small town, and I've never really spent time in Detroit Lakes, but I did this weekend and spent some time on the lake, Big Detroit Lake, which was wonderful. Perfect weather. Went golfing at one of the courses, and what a neat town! It was fun to be there, and hopefully they like what we're doing here, and because I think it's a neat place. I got to go back there soon.
How long does it take to drive up there? For people up in Detroit Lakes listening, Joe and I both live down in the metro area. I live in downtown Minneapolis, and Joe lives in the northern suburbs. But I've actually, now that the sites are doing well enough for me to, afford periodic meals, I've been looking for a cabin. I've always wanted a cabin. We never had one growing up. My mom's mom had a farm in Rush City. That was like my favorite place in the entire world, and my family's kind of been looking at getting a cabin and or land on Lake Superior. But I saw some stuff online, a couple really like older cabins in Detroit Lakes on that lake that were really affordable, and they were right on the lake. That seemed kind of cool, and I thought that'd be kind of a neat place to go.
Well, I bet you they're a little spendy right now because that is a very popular place. They have an awesome beach. I mean, it just extends it's got to be one of the best in the state. The beach on Big Detroit Lake that goes on and on and on. But from door to door for me, it's about 4 hours from Fridley to get up there. So it's a haul. You got to commit yourself for a while. You can't just go up for the weekend, I think, because it's a lot of driving. But certainly plenty of people do. But
maybe we could do like a UFTA Hyperloop. I don't know if you're familiar with the Hyperloop, those underground pressurized tubes that create a vacuum, so there's no friction from air. That I guess you can travel from New York to LA in 30 minutes or something.
That's
crazy.
What you want. Yeah, that's what you want. Get one of those.
We could do it on the cheap. Any press is good press. Owner of
I'll
liquefied.
I'll wait for that to happen. Then I'll move my living up to Detroit Lakes too. So we're all your peeps are, not mine, yours.
You know what? The more I think about it, it would be fun, and we could coordinate this with the team at KDLM. But it would be fun to do some sort of event up there, like once a year or something. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
See if people because we've had some positive feedback online, and it'd be fun to see if people actually listen to the show in any significant amount of numbers, and if they would, show up to whatever radio stations do. I don't know. I listen to satellite radio because I'm fancy now, but
it's always a little scary to come up from behind the microphone, Joe.
I know. It's one of those things where I think the mystery is better than the reality.
That's right.
They say never meet your heroes, and it's one of those never look at Joe Johnson directly. But anyway. it was kind of a slower news week, but we always find some fun Vikings topics to talk about. At the top of the show, I wanted to actually talk about a couple different things. One thing I teased last week was that we were going to be announcing a partnership with Paul Charchian, who I would say is essentially the godfather of fantasy football, if in Minnesota, if not just Minnesota, nationally. I think if people aren't familiar with him, he created or started fanball.com like in the late 90s, early aughts, and I think that was the first fantasy football website ever. He sold that, and he started a new fantasy football company and website called guillotineleagues.com that is a completely different format. And I asked him in the last week something I should have asked him a long time ago, but whether or not this format was unique to guillotineleagues.com or if it was something that other Yahoo Sports now has that option. And he essentially said that he didn't come up with the idea himself. Somebody else approached him with the idea, but guillotineleagues.com is the first, and as far as I know, the only fantasy football company that does this format, where essentially you have leagues of 18 teams, and each week everybody competes against everybody else, your full roster, and the lowest scoring team that week gets cut, hence guillotine. And then all of the players from that team get back out on the waiver wire. And so each week there's a ton of pressure to win, and then also the waiver wire is incredibly important. And it seemed like such a cool model. And so I was talking to Charch, and essentially was like, we have our app coming up, and every year I kind of talk about, creating a fantasy football department on the websites, and then we need a fantasy football sponsor, and it never really kind of turns into anything. And I said, so I really want to do it right, and you're the guy. And so we finally finalized everything, and we can announce this week what we teased last week, but we're doing an UFTA Sports Guillotine Leagues Super Chop League, where essentially we're going to have 12 separate teams of 18 people. Each of those 12 leagues is going to have either a writer that is, somewhat well known, or a former player, or a fantasy football expert, and so people can join for the buy-in is $50 per team, and you randomly end up on one of these 12 different leagues, and it's basically the way we're branding it is, if you tell your friends that you're, this fantasy expert, let's put your money where your mouth is and see if you can beat Matt Burke, John Sullivan, Wabi, Mr. Oberly, myself, AJ Mansour from K-Fan, so on and so forth in these leagues. And I think the top, if you end up winning the league, you win like $4,000. So it's nice. It's a pretty cool thing.
Joe, are those leagues, the draft, are they snake? Are they auction? How does that work? Or can you make it up whatever you want?
So I believe, I know that there's snake, but I believe,
nice.
I believe that's how it works. And actually, each person gets between 2 and 6 hours to make their pick. And so the drafts take obviously a while, but it's made so everyone basically, has the ability to be involved in the draft.
Nice.
and not be like, well, I can't make it, so I have to do an auto draft. If you have 6 hours, at some point you're going to be able to hop on your phone and make that decision.
That's good. Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. I mean, I'm I've never done an auction, so I'm not that familiar with them. But snakes, I'm good because then everybody's available to everybody for the most part. Well, they are in auctions too, but I'm excited for it. I think it'll be fun. I've never done a guillotine draft before, but it's kind of cool. Just beat one person each week, and then make your team stronger. Sounds like fun, doesn't it?
It really does. But I will say, you may be one of the better fantasy football players I've met. You always seem to do really well, and I'm the type of person who always watches fantasy football live from like 11:30 to noon, and at 11:59, because of that show, I'll always make a change that backfires without fail. And so I also like the idea of the entire roster playing.
Yes, yeah, that is cool. That takes that element out of it, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it also means the strength of your team, and it shows that you're not gonna hate yourself for a year because you made this one change and then your team got axed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you have to do good research ahead of time so that you have a deep team, and then you can just throw them all out there because you're probably winning week to week with some of those really down roster players, aren't you? I would think.
Especially with 18 teams.
Right.
I mean, you're really going to be. It's almost like the daily fantasy thing, where if you really want to win the $1 million on DraftKings or whatever, you can have one or two premier guys, but you're basically looking for a bunch of wide receiver threes to have the best game of their lives all at the same time. That's how it works.
Or you could work. Sure, you could work for them, for the DraftKings, and then just know what everybody else is doing, and then. Oops, was that out loud? I guess it was. Yeah.
Well, we weren't never going to get that sponsorship in the first place. So
no.
Stay tuned. There'll be some articles up this week and continuously, banners, all sorts of stuff for people to learn a little bit more about guillotine leagues, to click to join. Like I said, they have 3 buy-in levels. It's $50, $150, and $250. We wanted to start at the $50 level, and essentially, if we're able to fill those leagues as quickly as we believe we'll be able to, we're going to go up to the next level. And at the 150 and 250 level, like if you win, you're going to make over $10,000. And so it's the spots are going to be gone really quickly. And so just keep an eye out, everybody, on our social media, on the sites. Sign up, tell your friends. I think the funnest part would be able to have the bragging rights of being like, I beat, Matt Burke, Mr. Harvard at fantasy football. So we're all very, very excited. We're all very honored to be working with Charch. And
I don't think anybody's going to worry about it, Joe, because the Vikings are going to the Super Bowl this year, so that's what we'll be focused on.
So
right?
I put this on the agenda every week, and I've alluded to it. We've talked about it a little bit, but we never delve into it in the sort of satisfying way that I want to. And I really want your honest opinion as to why do you think right now, so not necessarily historically, even though I think there's a Venn diagram situation going on, that fans in Minnesota are so hyped about the Vikings, and they're saying, if they were a fringe playoff team last year, look at all the new or returning people on defense. Justin Jefferson's going to be better. They might even have a semi-decent offensive line for once, blah, blah, blah. This could be a contending team. And then on a national level, every article that comes out from PFF, Bleacher Report, so on and so forth, essentially, puts the Vikings at a mediocre to sub-mediocre team that probably won't make the playoffs, or if they do, they'll be one and done. Like, where do you think the discrepancy comes from?
You mean why everybody's so jacked this year? Is that what you're saying?
Well, why? I guess I could frame it this way. Why? why the national media isn't buying into the fact that what local fans think, that this Vikings team is somewhat a contender now.
Well, it's I heard someone say, someone in the from the Daily Norseman. I used to read him a lot, and I respect a lot of what he says. And he says that if the Vikings, with after all they've done this offseason, especially on defense, to improve things and and everything else, if they don't get it done for a deep playoff run this year, then it's time to start over and clean house with probably Zimmer and Spielman and what have you. And I don't necessarily agree with that. Because I think they did some great moves. They did some great moves, and they did a lot of moves. But let's remember, they are rebuilding a defense. Did the rebuilding the defense help Zimmer in his first year when he came back? No, he had to do a very poor defense. He had to rebuild it, and it took a while before they really became top 5, 10, top 5. This defense has to come together. There is a lot of new faces. There's, that defensive. I like what he's done. There's no question about it. There's some good players. I still am scratching my head how they did it from a salary cap perspective. I read I think earlier today that with what they saved on Hunter's salary cap, they now have $14 million remaining. That's amazing. With where they were sitting before the free agency period started. But you have to come together. You have to have some luck involved. You have to have so many different things, and you have to, for another season, you have to keep Kirk Cousins healthy. You have to keep Dalvin Cook healthy. You have to have the fact that the increased focus on Justin Jefferson is not going to make him regress. You have to have this offensive line, which is now just, it's potentially going to have 2 rookies and 2 new people starting on a position, I think, maybe, and maybe one other one. And that has to work. Just because you're on paper and you got these guys and they're all in and they're all saying, okay, we're all going in the right direction, it doesn't necessarily always come together that way. Sometimes these things you got a new offensive coordinator, for crying out loud. I don't care if he's Kubiak's kid. He's got a new system. They've got to learn it. The quarterback, who's got another new offensive quarterback, Kirk Cousins, what is it, 6 and 7 years or something like that?
I honestly think, sorry to interrupt you, but
that's okay. I'll go on forever.
That is a completely overlooked aspect of Cousins' time here.
Oh, absolutely.
Every season he's had, on average, a new OC. Because
he hasn't done bad with it.
That 1 year he had DiFilippo and Stefanski, right?
Right. He should be credited for how he's kept things afloat.
Completely agree with you.
Yeah, but
huge surprise there.
Just to put a cap on my point, yes, that's just another brick in this wall that affords this gap between the Super Bowl and where they were last year, or the gap between what the Vikings fans think and the national media says. Joe, we know this. This is the time to sell hope, and making all these moves does give one hope. It gives me hope. I'm excited for this season. I really do think they'll make the playoffs. I don't know, unless there's injuries up the wazoo, or if like I said, Kirk goes down. I don't think that Kellen Mond is ready to take this team forward. There's so many things that have to happen for it to be a huge deal, and that all that side aside, the national media has always liked to poop on the Vikings. So
I've always thought so too. I think the only time they really didn't was when Favre was here.
Right.
And I've told this story a couple times. It's not the most credibility building, but I'm an honest guy. I'm an open guy, and I believe in telling some of the stories from my life to remove stigma from it, and so people maybe can, not to say that I'm someone of note that can actually inspire anybody, but I went to treatment once because I had a drinking problem, or still do, obviously. That's something you never get away from. But the night that I graduated, and they did this coin ceremony where they pass a coin around to everyone in the program, and they all say the same platitudes. And I just kept saying to everybody, like, with all due respect, like, I know half of you find me irritating, but the draft is on. Can my graduation gift just be that we go watch the draft in the cafeteria, please? So
you're like Jack Nicholson, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Sorry, probably not a good. He's trying to watch the World Series, Anyway, go ahead.
Exactly. He tries to get everyone to vote, and then she won't.
Right.
Yeah. I actually just watched that movie for the first time like 2 months ago. And I finally get through it. I run down the hall. I turn the TV on, and I see the ticker come, and I saw that this is such a bad, again, credibility, not just because of where I was, but this part of it. I saw that Johnny Manziel was available, and they didn't take him. And I was the only time that I got in disciplined there because I yelled the F word at the top of my lungs. And we were in a hospital on the same floor, right adjacent to the maternity ward, and so they wanted us to be quiet. And so the security guard was like, "Joe, come on, man." And I was like, "Why wouldn't they take Johnny football?" And I'm not kidding you. One of the largest motivations I had at that point for drafting him was I knew that ESPN would give us some coverage.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was so sick of waiting an hour on Sundays for highlights that were like 15 seconds with no analysis. You know what I mean?
Yep. Well, Joe, that shouldn't surprise you. I was so pleased they didn't take him. Oh, my goodness. I was so happy. I didn't know what they were going to do, but I did not want this guy. I just thought he was trouble. Anyway.
You weren't wrong. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the main motivations and one of the reasons that I think our sites have done well and are growing and growing is that people are sick of that sort of East Coast Yankees, Red Sox, the big name teams get all the coverage. Nobody cares about the flyover states. Therefore, they kind of but getting back to the original point, I think the national media sees things that we as fans don't because we're too close to things, and we're too emotionally damaged from being Vikings fans forever. And the reality is, I think one of the most telling stats is, I think it's only 4 or 5 head coaches have ever won a Super Bowl after being with the team they won the Super Bowl with for more than 5 seasons. And all of those head coaches are Hall of Famers, and all the quarterbacks that they had when they won those Super Bowls were Hall of Fame quarterbacks. And I just don't... I'll just read what PFF said about Zimmer, because this week they said he was a lower tier head coach. I think they said he was the 20th best head, I guess if you want to call it best head coach in the NFL. The quote is, it's important to note that just because Mike Zimmer lands 20th in the NFL head coach rankings does not mean that he is a bad football coach. A revamped defense in 2021 could make us feel differently about where he should rank. However, it's tough to get around his 2 playoff wins in 7 seasons as head coach. One of them was a miracle missed tackle against the Saints.
The other one, and a one that they should have won was a missed 27-yard field goal. So let's not forget that either. You can say it either.
Yeah, but then you can, if you want to go down that avenue, then you could also say, well, it probably helped that it was absolute zero outside, and Seattle didn't know how to operate in
the point is, Joe, he put them in position to win both of those games. So one he won, one he didn't. I don't think he could.
Do you feel like if Cousins was the quarterback of that team and they lost 10-9, and they only mustered 3 field goals that anybody would forgive him for that. A, B, why does Cousins get all this crap, but Zimmer? Whenever I write an article critical of Zimmer, I get so much hate mail, and I don't understand where those people who also tend to hate Cousins give Zimmer a pass for basically getting not just going to the playoffs every other year, but getting embarrassed in the playoffs every other year.
I'm not going to deny that there's something out there that prevents Mike Zimmer from going to the next level, and some of it might be him. I'm totally enamored of his in-game maneuvers at all times. Sometimes I think it seems like it is above him. I don't know, but it is above a lot of people. It certainly happened to God's gift to Green Bay last year. He panicked in the wrong moment and lost a game to go to the Super Bowl. So this happens. There's a lot of pressure in there. I'm not going to say that. I'm just reacting to this. If you're going to call that one a miracle missed tackle against him, then you have to call the missed field goal for him. I mean, sure. That's only fair. I am not, and as far as Cousins, I think Cousins came to the team with a reputation and a history from his time in Washington, and he has done very little to dispel it. And that's unfortunate for him. I think he's a good quarterback. I don't know yet. He has not shown me that he's the kind of guy to take the team on his back and get you over the hump and take you to the promised land. We thought Favre was, and he proved that he fails at that at some times too. But his reputation was different because he did it. So much of this is built along those lines. I mean, you can look at and you can go find stats to back it up. Cousins, until he won a primetime game, he's going to be said that about him. Well, then he did it, and he didn't. Until he wins a playoff game, that's going to be said about him. I mean, and now you can't say that anymore. So I mean, that's media laziness that you clue into these little narratives and you throw them out there. Them ranking him 20th in the NFL, based on what? Tell me what that is. I mean, maybe there's 19 votes in here. I'd like to see who they are. There might be. I don't know. It's just, to me, I steer away from this kind of thing, and I don't give a lot of credence to them. But I think what this guy said, he's got a lot of line on the line this year. They drafted well, I think. They gave him they rebuilt the defense, in free agency. It could work out. It might not. But there's so many things that can go against it. And I've already mentioned them with Clint Kubiak and what have you. So I don't know. I know you like to you're different than me on Zimmer, and you're certainly different than me on Cousins. But I don't think we're that far off in those differences.
No, but at the same time, I feel like if Zimmer maybe was just either a high-level scout or someone in the personnel department, I think he's masterful at identifying
talent.
Developing it for his defense. I think the number of high picks that he has used on his defense have disproportionately worked out because he's really good at that. But I also think there's two things going on in that he gets completely outclassed by this new age of younger offensive-minded head coaches like Doug Peterson, who isn't that young, but,
happened once in a big spot.
Well, the 49ers game, too.
Oh, you said Doug Peterson. I was just specifically talking about Peterson.
Yeah, but, the Eagles game, the 49ers game. But then you could also make the argument in the Eagles game that he outcoached himself.
Yeah.
And that's an issue. I also think that, I don't know how PFF came to these conclusions. But I also think that he has some issues in regards to how he communicates with the media about his players, some of the issues that's created, some of the things that have been reported on and off the record about how he, essentially is. I've never once read something and been like, that's what I would like just yelled. I was right. I've been saying that for years. Like I wanted to call you, but it was 2 a.m.
Thank you for not doing so.
Reading that Go Long TD, the newsletter, the Substack newsletter by the credentialed Milwaukee Journal Sentinel sports writer who wrote this really long, really just astounding article about Zimmer and how a lot of former people from within the organization, players, other coaches, said that he was basically a glorified defensive coordinator that was lazy, collecting a check.
God, that's not true.
Everything.
The first part might be, but no, the second part is not.
Everything was everyone else's fault but his. You look at some of the stuff and it's hard not to connect the dots in that, like, wow, why have there been so many offensive coordinators? Some have been because of success, Pat Shurmur, but when has Norv Turner ever quit mid-season? He's been in the league since the Edsel was a car. Like he's never just up and.
And what has he done that doesn't warrant him saying I got to go during midseason? Saying see ya, Norv. Wouldn't want to be ya. I mean, no offense, but he's doesn't have the greatest resume himself.
Well, I'm not saying those are two separate issues. I'm not saying.
Why are you blaming that on Zimmer if he quits mid-season? Why is that Zimmer's fault?
Because. Well, first, to address what you said, his performance is neither here nor there in regards to him quitting. And he's never, in his career, mid-season, just said, I quit. Therefore, why is this outlier a thing? Why did DiFilippo get fired halfway through the season? Those are things you have to kind of think about, and you read those articles, and
what do you think about them?
I think that, and I've heard this from people that I respect, and this was part of the article, but that Zimmer, again, I think he really models himself after Parcells, but he doesn't do it in kind of the right way. It just comes off as mean-spirited. I think he cares way too much, and you're gonna laugh. You're not going to agree with this, but this was part of that article, and I've heard multiple former players tell the same thing. During scrimmages in practice, for example, if you call out the blitz package, he would get furious. The Go Long TD article talked about with DiFilippo, essentially Zimmer whispering to his defense what the offense was doing so they could win the scrimmage. Being really angry about instituting RPO and when these or 7-step drops when it was beating him in practice, and that's why DiFilippo refused to run the ball, because Zimmer wouldn't let him basically do. It was a very complex situation.
Yeah.
And so I think that he that is part of it, and I don't think PFF obviously included that, but I do think they included some of the stuff in regards to how he had to sit down with Greenway after he retired and was like, how can I be a better head coach? And then he turns around and he insults Sharif Floyd for not coming back to practice, and then he has nerve damage, so on and so forth.
Yes, but if he's repeating these things over and over again, I guess I would say then you could criticize him. If he makes a mistake like Rich Sharif or somebody else and then learns from it and goes, which he has done, and tried to talk to figure out how to better handle some of his players publicly, he's working on that. I'll give him credit for that. My issue here with what this quote from PFS is right here. A revamped defense in 2021 could make us feel differently about where he should rank. Why? Why should that make a difference? They put if they don't perform, he revamped the defense. It could make us feel differently about where he should rank. That just shows you that the criteria for these things is willy-nilly. He's still the same guy. He already put this defense together.
I agree with you. Basically, what he's saying is I'm ranking these head coaches solely based on what their wins and losses are this season or what I think they're going to be. But I don't think Zimmer's learned anything. I mean, last season he said that coaching the new corners that he had was like coaching kindergartners, and it angered them. I mean, one of them was on like NFL Network or ESPN and was really mad about it.
It probably means that they didn't know that much about the corner game in either his system or in the NFL. But yes, it was. You can't say these things these days because they get mad. He's old school. He's Parcellian. You nailed that, and he still acts like that. And he's a bit of a dinosaur. And if he doesn't change some of that, he's going to keep pissing off more and more. But what does it say that people like Mackenzie Alexander and what's the other dude? Alexander came back to be coached by him, or that Sheldon Richardson came back, and took less money. I mean, what do these say about, when's the last time that's ever happened for a Vikings team where they want to come back and play here, and one of them even taking less money? So,
I understand, but I do think that, and I mean this with all due respect, and you know how much I respect you, Joe, but I think that people pointing out like Mackenzie Alexander ignores a lot about the realities of the NFL as a business, and that the idea that Mackenzie Alexander, who spurned a longer-term deal from the Vikings to go to Cincinnati, most people said they thought he was mad because he had to play that Week 17 game, right?
Yep.
But he basically bet on himself, and he said, "I'm going to take a 1-year deal, and I'm going to prove everybody that I shouldn't have to play Week 17 meaningless games, and that I should be maybe not a nickel guy, I should be a starter." And it didn't work, right?
But haven't you ever mentioned the fact that Mackenzie left because Zimmer pissed him off?
Sure, but my point here is that I think when people argue about Mackenzie Alexander coming back, negating any sort of negative aspects of Zimmer's interpersonal relationships, so on and so forth, that assumes that Mackenzie Alexander has the pick of the litter of teams to join, and some of these guys are looking at it from the lens of...
Yes, you could certainly make that point.
Saying it's better for my career to go back to Minnesota where I know the system, and maybe I can still get that long-term deal. Or Sheldon Richardson thinks, that he'll have an outsized impact, and therefore it's better for his career, so on and so forth. I think Patrick Peterson's the same.
That's a great
point.
Thing. Wouldn't they not come back if it was just untenable here? If it was like, because it was made a big deal when these people left. Some of them people blame Zimmer for that. So doesn't it negate that, or certainly add nuance to that?
Maybe if it was like such agonizing abuse, but I mean, they have to look at these.
It sounds like you're saying that he does. He calls them kindergartners. Some of this is, God, I played high school football. Our coach was an ass. He called me plunger because my dad was a plumber.
Okay, I had coaches growing up playing hockey when I was like in 4th grade who said things that were you would not believe.
Yes, I've heard some of the most racist comments in my life from my high school.
And I'm not saying that I agree with this newfound sensitivity. I mean, our co-host during the season, Mike Tice, retired because he said guys don't want to be coached anymore.
Right.
I'm not saying I agree with it. What I'm saying is that you have to make some concessions in this new world, not because it's right or wrong, but because it's better for the team.
Agreed, Joe. Agreed. And I think Zimmer's trying to. I just think it's harder for him. And maybe that's a criticism that you can make. Bud Grant left partially for the same reason, because he lost. The players were gaining control and the coaches were not. I get that. And in this new day and where you make a great point, it's better for the team. And I think Zimmer's trying. My only question to you is, okay, goodbye, Zim. Who are you going to bring in? Clint Kubiak? You're going to see, who are you bringing in? How long?
Anybody.
See, that's not a good answer.
But honestly though, because the question doesn't follow.
Not anybody's going to get you to the playoffs as many times this season.
Sure, but at the same time, what has he done? Like, I'm not just saying anybody for the sake of being for effect. What I'm saying is the question basically implies that Zimmer don't replace Zimmer because who you replace him with might not be it could be worse.
Yeah. Could be. I agree with that.
But that's then what you're basically arguing is let's just never make any changes at all.
No, I'm not.
That's but that is the logic of the question.
No, you better have somebody in mind to replace him, and I don't know who that is. Zimmer also plays in a division where a Hall of Fame quarterback, one of the best of all time, plays. It's like playing in the Patriots division. You're not, unless you have to get past Aaron Rodgers every year. So, there's a little bit there. You can't just lay it all that it's like this guy said, it doesn't say he's necessarily a bad coach, but.
I'm sure there's a laundry list of young coordinators out there. I've sort of made the argument that, perhaps having an offensive-minded younger head coach come in here would be better than having a defensive-minded head coach, because we have, such amazing elite talent on this offense, and we've honestly seen kind of the peak of what Zimmer's defense can do, and it's basically shown us that it needs an elite offense as well, even when it sounds hyperbolic, but I could make the argument that no head coach has ever been put in a better position than Zimmer was from 2014 up until now. Either through just timing or through having the keys to the kingdom, right?
You could say that. I'd like to see the facts behind it, but yeah.
Okay, U.S. Bank Stadium just got ranked the number one stadium in the country. TCO is the number one facility in the country. He got every single draft pick that he wanted. He had, for a position that has 2 starters, he got 5 first-round picks for it because it's his position of obsession. Every single dollar he asked for to be spent on the roster he wanted to build, he got. To get the quarterback to get over the hump, they changed the way that the NFL wrote contracts forever to do that.
Well, do you want me to have to point out that his quarterback is not who he wanted?
He wanted for nothing.
He didn't want Cousins. Cousins was not his guy.
He wanted Case Keenum, the guy that
No, he didn't want him either. He probably wanted something else. He didn't want to sell the farm to Kirk Cousins, but he was kind of forced to, because there was nothing else to do out there, and they hadn't drafted one.
Who tells Zimmer what to do?
I do. What?
Nobody tells Zimmer what to do. Zimmer, every week in 2017, in the media, wouldn't even confirm for the upcoming game that Case Keenum was the starter.
Yeah, he likes to play those games. Here's where I will criticize him. I'm not enamored with his newest offensive coordinator. You said there's this long list of offensive coordinators out there. I'd like to see who they are and bring one of those into the offensive coordinator, and then you can maybe, move up. But suddenly we're because he likes Gary Kubiak and he likes his kid. I don't know that he's ready. He's never had that position elsewhere before, so I'm not excited about it.
I was resigned to it just because I was like, you know what, we need continuity because Cousins keeps having these changes, and I don't agree with his own blocking system, to be completely honest with you, but we're too far down that rabbit hole now to go back. What are we going to do, revamp it for another 10 years?
And that's kind of the way we are with Zimmer. But.
Yeah. And they fired George Edwards after the 49ers game, even though the reason they lost that game was because the offensive line every play was dead before it even started, and I thought that was a clear sign.
I thought he wanted to leave. I didn't know that they fired him.
Oh yeah, they fired him right after the game. Anyway, yeah,
You're not a Zimobo, I know.
But I still, at the same time, I think that they've drastically improved their chances. I do also think it's ironic that all these positive roster moves, so on and so forth, I think have almost made Zimmer's hot seat hotter.
Yeah,
that's what I mean.
That's what I said. That's how I started out this conversation with.
Yeah.
It said that if they don't do improve now, it's time to clear house. What would you do if they won the Super Bowl, Joe? Would your view of Zimmer change? I think PFS would.
Oh, of course it would. I mean, I'm not an unreasonable person, but I honestly...
It shouldn't. It shouldn't, Joe. It shouldn't. If all the reasons that you're saying that, and all of a sudden he wins the Super Bowl, so then he's a great coach.
No, I would say, you know what? I would say I was wrong about him. I didn't think he could do something that he just did.
Okay, all right, I'll give you that. That's kind of a loaded question, but it just I just hate dragging on people all the time, and I don't know that there's any objective way to view it all. I mean, I would love to see Aaron Rodgers gone and see how that team does without him, and see if all of a sudden their coach is the genius that everybody thought he was when he came in. It's ultimately the players. And if you draft good players, you develop good players, you put them in a position to win. If you can't do that, then you got to go. But I feel like Zimmer does that to a certain degree. Sometimes I feel like he panics in the ends of games where you really need to be on top of it. Yep. I coached grade school basketball, and at times I was hyperventilating. Didn't know what to tell them down the stretch. They'd come over and they'd time out. They're all looking at you like you got this Hoosiers speed. Go on, do the picket fence for crying out loud.
Yep.
I don't know what to tell them, and it is seriously. I couldn't drink enough water. It's so intense in those moments, and so it bothers me because I see a little bit of that in Zim sometimes. I don't know if he's got that play up his sleeve or that great move. If it depends on his defense, maybe he does. But I don't know if we have the offensive minds to do that. I don't know. And
yeah, I'll never forget Harrison Smith in the Eagles game, kind of throwing his arms up after the 10th. Wide open catch for 30 yards, and I was like, man, if he's confused. I coached a women's over 40 hockey team with my brother-in-law, 8 years ago, and it was women who had never really played hockey before, and I was the coach of the defense, and whenever the other team would score, they'd come, and after a while, they kind of got not frustrated with me. They'd be like, Joe, you're a coach. You're supposed to give us advice when they score. When they score, tell us what happened and how to improve. And I said, what? Okay, next time, don't fall down. I don't know what else to tell you, but that's the solution to all these problems.
It's intense, and I will give Zimmer credit to a certain degree. He knew he got his hat handed to him in Philadelphia, and so they went out and hired the offensive coordinator to figure out what the hell happened to his defense. Isn't that an admission that, okay, I got a coach. I got to do something about it. It's
Yeah,
not.
and then he
It's not.
ran that offensive coordinator.
And how's he done since then? He's gone for a couple more teams, hasn't he? So I mean, he can't. I know what you're saying, and I don't disagree, but it's so much more nuanced than we all make it. Zimmer hasn't won the big one, so get rid of him. I'm not saying that's what you're saying. You put out a lot of good reasons why, but I'm just not completely there yet. I'm like PFF. A revamped defense in 2021 can make me feel differently where I should rank him.
Yeah.
So. Anyway.
Then they should have titled the article something different. It shouldn't have been an attempt to objectively rank head coaches based on certain qualities. It should be essentially, here's our rankings of what we think these coaches will do this season, what their record will be.
Right.
And I do think that to put a pin in the original question of the national media versus local media or local fans, I do think it's a little strange that if the Vikings went 7-9 last year, to expect them not to make the playoffs this year, considering.
Right. I totally agree. I mean, they have to be on the cusp, and if Rodgers is gone, expect it even more. That should,
big time. They have those two giant guys in the middle of the D line. Honestly, if they had the offensive line that Russell Wilson complains that basically wanted out of Seattle because of, that they would have a top 3 scoring offense in the NFL. Mm-hmm. I mean, that
weren't they top 5?
They were top 5 in yards.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're right. They were like 14 in scoring. You're correct.
Yeah, but I think that they, again, and we talked about this a lot, but I think a lot of that was by effect. I think they could have scored a ton of points, but they wanted those long, methodical drives. They didn't want
Zimmer did.
Yep, they didn't want to get into shootouts, and I'm not knocking it. I get it. They didn't have the defense to get into those situations. Now they may. I do find it a little strange that, and I don't, I'm not knocking anything that our writers do say for something that I'm going to talk about at the end of the show, but there was an article written essentially saying that, the Vikings don't even really need Jeff Gladney, who obviously his career's not even probably over. It's definitely over. But looking at some of these moves the Vikings have made with Patrick Peterson, or what was the name of the guy that they signed?
Bruce. It started with 2 B's. His name is
like Bleeman.
Bleeman Blinkens. I don't know what his name is.
But it's funny that isn't it? Yeah, Breland, not Bleeman. He's kind of a middle of the road guy. He's started for the Chiefs a few games. It's not like he's a guy even on Patrick Peterson's level. But I saw that article about they don't even need Jeff Gladney, and then I saw the article you wrote yesterday about the shooting that happened this week and how life will happen, and essentially, and I'm paraphrasing, but with the cornerback situation, we kind of are lucky that they overinvested those 5 first-round draft picks, because look what happened with Mike Hughes and look what happened with Gladney, and it's kind of the same thing with the defensive line.
Yep.
And so, I wanted to give you a chance to explain in your article a little bit, but also I think it's very cavalier to kind of assume that just because things are as they are now means that's how they'll be at the end of the season. I mean, we've seen what injuries can do last year, and
Yep.
At the same time, I do feel like they are from a cornerback perspective, an injury or two away from being in deep trouble.
Yeah, I guess the Jalen Twyman shooting was the jumping off point for me. I mean, in a matter of an hour on Twitter, I saw somebody say, "Why are the Vikings signing so many defensive tackles?" And then about an hour later, these things happen to Twyman. I just go, well, it's kind of like one answered the other. I mean, life happens, things happen. I mean, we've had a history of it here. We've had injuries. We've had Michael Pierce sitting out for COVID. We've had,
Linval Joseph got shot.
Linval Joseph got shot. Starting to wonder what the deal is with defensive tackles.
I know it's especially for Linval, like leaving the Giants, thinking, well, now I'm in small town Minneapolis, it's safe. At the first weekend he's here, he gets shot.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I was kind of putting together the history of all that, and for me, this was that was the jumping. I started thinking about the cornerback, that situation in Minnesota a few weeks ago, because the Vikings kept signing more cornerbacks, and going, what are they doing? And it got to me to be a comical point. I mean, they have 6 free agent cornerback signings, and they didn't draft any this year, but they have like 15 on the roster. And I'm just going, my goodness, what's going on here? Well, then stuff happens. Then you got Gladney happens, and then Dantzler's hurt, and then some of these guys may end up being turned into safeties. Who knows? I mean, at some point, but they're all obviously not going to be on the roster when it comes down to the thing. But Zimmer's trying to figure out a rotation there after what he went through last year, and he's always made that statement: you can never have enough cornerbacks. And you know what? To be perfectly honest, he's right. Since he's been here, I've never realized that cornerbacks get injured as much as they do.
I know.
It has surprised me over time. I never even paid attention to that until he made that comment. And then you look, and and then I started saying, well, yeah, I guess these guys are acrobats out there, and they're contorting their bodies in strange ways, and it's probably the most difficult position to do, because you're running away from the ball and you got to somehow turn around and get back to it to make a legal defense of the play. They're going to get injured.
Oh, yeah, the momentum of running backwards then cutting forwards.
Yes. And so it's true. He's absolutely right. But this offseason has gone to a comical. So I just started putting it together, and I'm talking about both loading up on a defensive line, which was bad last year and is the fulcrum of your defense, and loading up on cornerbacks, which is where in a passing league it's really hugely important. I said, I think the linebackers are going to be okay. They're going to find a nice rotation. They're getting 2 of their stars back from injury, so they had to figure out how to get the defensive line set up to be real, stop the run and really pressure that quarterback, which helps the cornerbacks. So
and then there's the special teams aspect of it.
That's true too.
They have to rebuild what was an atrocious special teams unit, and corners are gunners, and
they're some of the best athletes you have on your team. They've always said that, cornerbacks. And so it is a fine thing. I said when I first thought, I was starting to get annoyed with it. Now when I see the stuff that happens in life, I said, okay, I'm in. Go ahead, Zim. Figure it out. Get the numbers you need, pare them down, get a decent roster, and
I wonder if there's
then wait, Joe, and then maybe it'll make me feel differently about where I should rank.
I wonder if there's a disproportionate amount of injuries at the cornerback position under Zimmer, because
that's a question I wanted to.
He asks so much of them.
That's a very good question.
I should look into that.
Yeah, since he's been here and he said that, we started looking at it and said, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Of course, you can't include a Xavier Rhodes in there, since he would get hurt and come back and get hurt and come back and get hurt and come back all in the same game.
I know people would kind of joke that he would feign injury when he got beat, but there were a couple times where it looked like his knee went the wrong direction.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
it'd be like, okay, well, he's done for the year, and then he'd come out of the tent and just be like, are they cloning him?
Yes.
So
No,
yeah,
it's
I know
well
you.
worth looking into, Joe. That's actually an interesting question.
But yeah, your article is very timely, and I think that that's one of my larger fears for this season. Both, really, the entire secondary is they're a little thin, but as you mentioned, they still have about 14 million left. You want to keep some of that for the season, for injuries that you might have to pick up somebody here or there. Um, but I would feel a lot better if they, landed some sort of, I don't know, safety or corner that was of note. Did someone sign Richard Sherman yet?
I don't think so. He's a free agent. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, he was like a top 5 free agent.
We've got Patrick
He's
Peterson
still a
already.
free agent. Yeah.
But we've already signed Richard Sherman. His name's Patrick Peterson. So I don't.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, yeah, I wanted to end the show by issuing a retraction and an apology to a couple former Vikings players who, the long and short of it, it's hard for me to describe because I don't necessarily want to reconnect them to something that they didn't deserve to be in the first place. But there was an article posted by one of our senior writers about the canceled and rescheduled sort of boat tour on Lake Minnetonka that was, I'm sure everyone heard about. There were a lot of jokes being made about it. At best, it was an ignorant oversight, and at worst, it was trying to monetize something that was a kind of a really messed up event, from 12, 13 years ago. And, one of our writers kind of dismissed our protocol and the way that we do things, and essentially wrote an article based on unsubstantiated rumors from social media, and named Dante Culpepper, Tommy Kramer, and John Randall as people that were rumored to have signed up to come to the rescheduled boat party. And none of that was true. That was something that was easily verifiable for that writer. He did not do anything the right way, and I don't want to complain or say poor us or poor me, but he damaged our reputation, but he more importantly, and much more something that's much worse and more important, is that he connected these 3 men who have played and worked their entire lives to build a brand. And some of these guys didn't play in the era of these gigantic contracts, and their brand now is of outsized importance because of sponsorships and monetization. And for their name to be connected to something, and for that to be posted on the network that I built, I just want to take complete responsibility for it. Again, I didn't write it, but I own the website. It was posted on my network. I'm mortified that this happened, that these guys were upset, that their reputation, even if it said rumored, was tarnished. It makes me angry. It makes me really upset, and so I want to again issue that retraction. I want to apologize to Dante, to Tommy, who's been on our show twice, to John Randall, who I've spoken to a few times and is a great guy, and say that none of that was true. These are great guys. They did not deserve their names to be so flippantly and cavalierly just included in an article based on social media rumor. That is not what we're about here. With the sports, that's not us. We don't trade in rumors. We've worked incredibly hard to try to shed the sort of, four-letter word that is blog, to the NFL, because to be completely honest with you, the biggest thing that the NFL has against blogs, or online-only entities, as they also call it, is that anybody can post anything at any time. There's no editorial standard, and their fear is articles like this. And so it just validates things that I've sacrificed everything. Joe, you've sacrificed a lot. Again, I'm not trying to make this about us because we're in the wrong, but it's something that I want to explain that way to show how important this is and how seriously I'm taking it, and how just again, I'm so sorry to those guys, and I want to explain it in that way so people understand that there's a reason we don't do things that way. And if it's to be completely honest with you, everything that I've learned about sports journalism, I've learned from you. That's why I always call you my mentor.
That's scary.
I didn't go to school for sports journalism, and this has really made me look at our operation and say, we need to perhaps change how we do some things, but we also need to really bring some guys in and pay them to teach some of our guys journalistic ethics and how to really do these things, because this was such a amateur sort of just awful thing that was done for the worst possible reasons. The incentive, the motivation was not a good one. It was basically to get the story first so you can make the most money possible, and it disregarded the reputation of guys that I grew up really looking up to. And I know, they tell you if you're going to come to any Vikings event as a journalist, you can't even wear purple, let alone ask for an autograph. You're not supposed to act like a fan, but I'm a fan. We all are. It really does not sit well with me to know that guys that basically are the reason that I pursued this as a dream were hurt by what I built. I just feel awful about it.
It well said, Joe, and unfortunately it happened. It's really a journalism 101. You don't traffic in rumor unless you can verify those things as fact. And with every story, right, we're always on the precipice of something like this happening. While these people are public figures, they have. That doesn't mean that you can salaciously publicize rumors about them if they're not true, or even if they are. I mean, I've never even been one for that. And this was, like you said, done for the wrong reasons, and it was executed very poorly. And it shows you just what's on this other side of that precipice. I mean, you can really hurt somebody and damage their reputation. And like you said, they are still trading on that reputation as they go forward. And if they've built a career around it, to be able to take it down in any form or fashion that easily is really scary. So you have to be careful. You have to be diligent. You have to, especially if you're trying to report something that could have this possibility to hurt somebody. You darn well better check it and make sure and get 2, if not 3 sources or more. And and that, unfortunately, that could have been, the source could have been consulted on this one, and it wasn't. And that's a huge failing on our part.
Exactly. And I remember one of the first things you told me, that when we started working together years ago, and you kind of took me under your wing, was I think I wrote an article about firing someone or cutting somebody, and you basically were like, I personally never write those sort of articles. I don't agree with them. And you said, Joe, you have to realize that these are human beings with families.
Yep.
And that always, that always stuck with me. And
it's so easy to think of them not. It's so easy to think of them as the purple uniform that they wear and not.
Exactly, and to make excuses and say, well, we said it was a rumor, and blah blah blah. That's I really, and I maybe not all of it is altruism or whatever. Maybe it makes me feel good about myself, and it's not 100%, selfless. But I really, I worked for an internet startup out of college. I had a horrible experience, and I've always wanted to, run my own company so I never had to be in that situation again, and B, where, I want every intern that we have to their first experience in the industry to be positive, and every person that we work with and every writer, everyone is treated fairly and compensated as such. And it's just so against the sort of the mission of what we do here, and some bells can't be unrung, and so again, there'll be an article that'll be live by the time the show is up as well. But I just wanted to apologize to
Joe,
those guys again because man, it just wasn't okay.
On the other side of the coin, it's not something that happens often here. And like you say, we do have protocols in place to make sure it doesn't. But things happen, and the right thing to do is to acknowledge it and apologize for it.
The only rumors that I trade in are ones about you.
Yeah,
that's where the clicks come from. All them Oberly rumors.
Yes, the life I lead, I tell you, it's that's for sure.
Did you know that Oberly buys that maple syrup? But that's kind of a weird way to end the show. But again, also, if you're interested in competing in the UFTA Sports / Guillotine League, Super Chop League, check out VikingsTerritory.com, PurplePTSD.com. You'll see the information there. You can sign up. It's $50 per head. The leagues are going to fill up fast. You'll see the list of all the different ex-players or fantasy football gurus that you'll be competing against, what the first, second, third place prizes are. And hopefully you'll join us this season, and we'll all have some fun. But we will return next week, which I think will be the 30th of June. But this has been the Vikings Territory Breakdown for the 23rd of June. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. See you next week. Skol.